interesting topic. I want to deal with a few things. First, I want to deal with curses because it's so imperative and so important to understanding why some of the, residual effects of the past trickle into the future or into the present. um, it's very interesting. For a long time, and still now, I often struggle with topics to talk about, and it's a conversation that I often have with my mom because in having certain conversations, it does expose or open up or create vulnerability. And over the past week, I've been really dealing with this idea of the how of Torah, not just the practical, and by practical not meaning to demote anything in any part of Torah, but literally talking about the things that we begin to do. So the fringes, keeping the Shabbat, changing your diet, um, you know, submission, and those things are things that come in the beginning. You know, covering your head, wearing a skirt, obviously not celebrating pagan festivals. But then you get to a point in your walk, and you get to a point where I'm doing these things, and I know I'm a flawed human, and I'm carrying out these functions, and it seems like there are still things that are not changing. And when you experience that, especially when you begin to study and you can understand the word, and the word is not, veiled to you, you get to a point where, especially in my life, especially with sharing publicly online, where there's like a roadblock between now what becomes personal and what becomes private. And I believe, and I'll think more about it later probably, but I believe a lot of that comes from Christianity. As I was driving, thoughts going through my head, I'm thinking, obviously, as a family, as a unit, as a community, for those who support me and my family, we're going through it, of course. And so obviously your brain starts to think about a lot of things. And I start thinking about the fact that things are still very, very surface in this walk, in our culture, in our understanding, and in our interactions, because we're still protecting ourselves from ourselves. And as I started thinking and surveying through scripture, I realized that what makes Torah and Tanakh and the Brit Hadashah so real and so impactful is that you don't only get the good, but you also get the bad and the very bad. And so when it comes to relationship and growth, you go back and you look at these stories and you look at these people, and there's a connection, not necessarily always with the person, but with the creator, because of what that person has gone through and how he does not cover those things. And in Christianity, we're taught that love covers a multitude of sin. And so in Christianity, we practice how to cover our sin the best. That is the practice of Christianity. It is, we had problems and we've overcome them. And if we're going through problems, we don't tell you till we've made it through our problems. And if we are having issues, we smile and bear it and we grin, because we don't want people to be discouraged by our realities. And I get it, because you don't want to take away hope. But what I realize is that people often hope in people, and we don't hope in the one we're supposed to hope in. And so what it does is it causes people to live and to hide their issues until they've overcome them. And if they never overcome them, then we just always hide them. And I'm just not okay with that. I'm not okay with it. I don't feel like it benefits anyone. I don't feel like it's reality. And because I don't believe that I'm in a religion, I don't feel like I have to adhere to religious norms in order to coddle people's personal perceptions of my life or anyone else's life. Now, in doing so, I also don't believe in sharing anybody else's story. I don't believe in exposing things that people are not ready to have exposed. So I'm going to share some things about me personally, but in doing so, and prayerfully, I will do it in a way that tells you about me, and no one else. And it's kind of impossible, but it's possible. I believe it is. And what made me think about this is because the underlying factor of it all is that there is an enemy. And the enemy, his job is to be an accuser. And as long as there are unresolved or covered or masked things, past, present, or future, they could be totally invalid to everyone in the world, but they're still valid to me. What he does is then he uses those things to then cripple or push you away from your goal or purpose because of the ability to recall the past. The only ability that the enemy has is to bring up your past self, because the enemy has not been given the ability to see what you will be in the future. So the plan is to continue living in the dead self so that you can never arise and be the living self. So important. So important. So a movie came to my mind, and the movie was 8 Mile. I know. Terrible. And remember in 8 Mile at the end, if you've seen the movie, if you haven't, don't even waste your time. I'll tell you what happens. So at the end of the movie, the rapper is Eminem, and he's like this, he lives in the slums on the other side of the tracks, and he wants to be a rapper. And, you know, it's a pretty decent rapper. And he gets ready to go into this rap battle. And when he gets ready to go into the rap battle, he literally disarms his opponent by talking about himself first, picking at himself first. And what ended up happening was it took all the ammunition away from his opponent. And that moment sticks in my head, and it comes up at times, and obviously in times like this, it definitely does, because oftentimes in a relationship, whether it's with friends, family, and other people, when people have ammunition on you, then they always use it in a time of weakness. Nobody ever attacks you. No enemy ever attacks when their opponent is strong. In a boxing match, you box with your opponent, and you try to you try to keep your stamina, and as your opponent loses their stamina, you go ahead and use that reserve and use it against them. And the enemy is the exact same way. So before I even get started, I'm going to go over a couple of curses, and then I'm going to deal with something that is really affecting our community, not just necessarily me personally, but overall, and then I'll share some things as I feel prompted. And what happens in scripture, and then when people come into Torah, is that we're often always looking at other people, right? So if we go with the biggest dichotomy in our culture, it's male and female. And so when you come into Torah, the first thing is, our women are out of control, get our women in control. And our women are out of control because our women are whores. And I'm not going to argue with any of the accusations, because everyone has a valid point for every place that they are and what they've been through. So our women are whores. They cheat. They are loose. They want attention. They want blah, 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 blah. So then mainly within the Hebrew culture, what you have is a lot of women trying to, and a lot of us achieving at, suppressing what are the external factors of a deeper root cause. And So you have women who are beginning to dress modest, which is beautiful. Going back to their natural roots, whether it's their hair or whether it's beauty or toning it down, whatever they are doing to bring in this thing of modesty and respect for self. Changing the music we listen to, changing the crowds we hang around, changing the television that we watch, changing whatever about a culture that was given to us, and going back to our original roots. And so you have women like, okay, if I talk too much, I'm going to be quiet. If I'm disrespectful, I'm going to learn how to be overly respectful. I'm going to homeschool my kids so I can be home. I'm not going to be materialistic. And you are making beautiful sacrifices for your soul's salvation. So there's nothing wrong with them. At the same time, most of the things on the other side that are fixed for men are normally surface as well. And it is, okay, I'm a thug. I got a bunch of kids I don't take care of. I'm not providing for my family. I don't have brotherhood. I'm not studying. I'm not reading. And once again, they begin to do those things. They're wearing fringes. They're turning away from pagan customs. They're eating different, the whole nine. And at this point in our walk, we've covered the surface issues, but now there's underlying issues that have not been dealt with. Because if our women, which we are, it's talked about in scripture, haughty, wanton, outstretched necks, we have these issues, right? And whether it's on a public level or whether it's on a private level, it's an issue. And what has happened is, because these are issues that were part of our women, so we have women who are married, who had other children, who've had previous children, who've been with previous partners. You have all these issues where now, though, that the people who have come into Torah have changed, there's not been a renewed mindset in the creature like it has been in the creator. And so most of the enemy's accusations often come from within. So not necessarily just relationally, but it comes from the men to the women and the women back to the men. And so now there's a divide where you have women who are walking in Torah still being... Sorry about that. Forgot to charge it while I was talking. So what you have is where I left off, if you left and then came back, was this idea of the past being brought into remembrance. And so you have two imperfect people who have come into the perfect law of Torah and who are trying to walk out this law in their lives in order to perfect them, yet both people are expecting perfection from imperfect people. It causes problems. And while it was on pause, I was thinking about all of this, and the end goal and the way that the brain works and where a lot of us go when we are in situations like this is to divorce. And the reason being is because, one, a lot of people are no longer Christians, so you're not held to the same religious standards. So it's like an easy fix. But I'm going to give you the reason why the Most High gave divorce, because it popped into my head, and it's for this very reason. Divorce was given, and the Hamashiach says this, because of the hardness of our hearts. And I didn't really understand that literally until probably today. Because you have to see the greater enemy in it all. And what happens is, while our walk might change, while our clothing might change, while our diets might change, while, our customs and culture might change, there's a lack in our change of heart. And that being that we do not and have not arrived at, and I shouldn't say everybody, it could be either or, both people in a relationship, and as a community as a whole, we have not arrived at the place of seeing people how Yah sees them. And I know that that is difficult because we are imperfect people. But when you're dealing with, let's say, with people who have passed, or with relationships that have passed, because a lot of us are in relationships, and you have a past in your relationship. And what happened is, when we crossed over into Torah, when we really started keeping it, not when we knew a little information, and not when we were just studying a little bit, and not when we knew what some words were, and not when we just started eating pork, or not when we, not there. But when we really started walking out and Torah became a part of our everyday life, when we began to live Torah, when Torah was the final say, what happened is we began to realize that we didn't see people quite like we should be seeing them. And we still saw them with carnal eyes. So we've moved from the physical carnality, but spiritually, the things of the past still bother us. Whether it be infidelity that happened before Torah or in Torah, or however it happened. Whether it be infidelity, whether it be when a person was, into multiple wives, and now I'm going to take 7 wives, and I studied some more, and I can't do this. And you carry with you this baggage, and what happens at a point, there's a hardness of heart that sets in. And I think, and I believe, that the Most High always calculates in human error when he's dealing with individuals who are imperfect, which is us. And divorce was made permissible. It's not his perfect will, but it's his permissible will when 2 imperfect people can't get past the flaws that they see in one another. Now, I have a whole video on divorce and how divorce works. It's a whole nother video. If you want to go check that out, go ahead. But we're talking about perception. And I have witnessed more people, and because I'm being transparent, even myself, in this walk, who have looked at myself and looked at my mate and said, there is no way in hell this is going to work. And I get it. Today I understand it. Because there is baggage in both people, whether it's sexual, whether it's emotional, whether it's whatever it is, there's baggage. And with that baggage, people bring parts of themselves into the relationship, into Torah, and then we want to hold on to those parts of ourselves. And then what happens is, when we hold on to those parts, or our partner holds on to those parts of us that we're trying to let die, it taints the relationship. And I never knew how hard it was to move past things until you've moved past things, and then the person you're with hasn't moved past them. And I'm sure a lot of people have been in that place where I'm past my sin, because every sin that we commit is not to the other person. And it's funny because I used to get so upset when I would have friends and people, it's not my dynamic, but when I would have friends or people who would be in relationships, and the person in the relationship, let's say the man or the woman, but either person, but when it came up, the person cheated, a person would normally say, you just can't let it go. And you would be like, but how can a person let it go? And then the person would be like, but I didn't do it to you. And you're like, but you did do it to me. And so we take like infidelity and all these things, extremely personal. And I was listening to an album, and if you haven't heard of Beloved Daoud, you should really check him out, because he has some really, really good music, and within his music there's some really good snippets. And one of the snippets was talking about the inability for people in Torah to function because they take personal offense to people and their questions, or how they feel about Torah, or even their disdain for Torah. And I'm paraphrasing, but one of the things that Beloved Daoud, D-A-U-D, and one of the things that he said was, which law, I'm paraphrasing, which law of yours did a person break? How have they offended you in anything that they've done when nothing they've done was really against you, but everything that they've done has been against the Father and his perfect law and his perfect will for their life? And that made my whole world go gloop. Because I was like, wow, one, personal check. Because so often in relationships, we bring to remembrance people's offenses, what they've done to us, how they make us feel, but then when they do it back to us, like we say, when we pull a you on you, then it doesn't feel the same. And not that it doesn't hurt us just the same, but what it does is it wasn't to us, and the overall offense, even in the judgment, will not be brought on our account. Like, look how you did this. When the Father calls all of us to the judgment, because all of us have that appointment, he won't say, when you did this to this, you did this, hurt this person, and that's why I'm doing this. He's going to say, when you did this to that person, it hurt me because they were mine. And that's why I have to execute judgment, or that's why this happened, or that's why this happened. So when I began to think about that, I began to think about myself. And a long time ago, at this point, over 5 years ago, my relationship was in a very, very terrible place. And while in the beginning I wanted to make excuses for my actions, for infidelity, whether it be verbal, emotional, it's all the same. When you break communication with your spouse, when you break the marriage bed with your spouse, however you do, it causes damage, because the relationship between the two of you should be at a place where that person is your best friend, where you should be able to share things with them, they should be able to communicate with you, and even when they hurt you or offend you, it's not detrimental, because you know that person has your best interest at heart. I never understood in Song of Solomon when she refers to her lover as her brother, because it's like, that's kind of weird. But as you begin to understand what a relationship is, and the relationship that we have with our siblings, and the relationship that we have with our really, really close friends, where, they can annoy us to death, they can do things, they can be so dumb, yet we still forgive them and we look past them. Oftentimes that relationship that we have with other people does not transfer into the relationship that we have with our spouse. And so while I was thinking about all that years ago, went on a fast, and I resolved a lot of those issues with the Father. Like, I didn't do this, or I didn't do anything to, and then that wouldn't be 100% true. What I did, thinking I was hurting this person for how they made me feel, my feelings, wasn't to this person. And in the end, it didn't hurt the person, because when you do stuff, and when you do sneaky shit, and I said shit because it's sneaky shit, when you do sneaky shit and you cover up stuff and you are trying to mend an emotional break between you and your partner, then when you try to do that, you are creating adverse effects that are going to affect you, because you have to keep the secrets, you have to hide the stuff, You have to live with it. So the stuff that you're doing, thinking you're somehow mentally recovering from damage that somebody else has done to you, only leaves you more damaged, because now you have to cover it up. You have to think about it every day. And then when the relationship begins to mend itself, then you have to carry these things like, shit, now this person's, being this person to me, and now I can't even accept this person being this person to me because I've done this sneaky shit. And now I'm eventually have to tell the person, which is then eventually going to ruin the relationship. And our relationship is already not great because of just other things. In my case, I have a blended family, of course. My husband's 20 years older than me. So we have a lot of gaps in just thinking and communication and how we express love and how we do things. And so when you're trying to work through that, and then you come into Torah and you're learning that you're supposed to be doing this, you're supposed to be doing that, it's hard to even implement those things, because when you do sneaky shit, even though the person doesn't know you do sneaky shit, you have done it. And now you feel guilty. So then what comes after that is that now you have to say something about it. Because Torah just doesn't let you live in a lie. So you're living in this lie. And then you have to tell on yourself. Because the amends you make with the Father are spiritual, but then there also has to be physical amends. And when you get to a point where you love the Father and you love truth more than you love yourself and more than you love covering yourself, then you have to. And so then you expose yourself. And then not only already dealing with like those things I pointed out before, the fact that you're two flawed people and you're in a relationship, but now you add to that all of your flaws, or all the things that the person may have just thought about you, it's now true. And now you're left to hope that a person who is imperfect and has done things, and you want to, like in my case, I want to blame you for the reasons why I did things that I did, why I felt the way that I felt, why I was disrespectful the way I was disrespectful, whether it was around other people, not around other people, whether it was talking to other men, whatever the case may be, you want to justify it. You're like, well, this is why I did this. Well, if you hadn't treated me like this, and if you weren't like this, and if I felt like I was in a relationship with a person, then I wouldn't be pursuing other relationships. And you make all these excuses. But then it comes down to the root cause, because now this person now has a valid reason, when they probably didn't before, to feel the way they then feel about you. And then what you enter in is to what I like to call a perpetual hell. Because the perpetual hell is this. I'm going to, me personally, I think we all in our minds, and excuse me if I ramble a little bit because I'm still trying to process a lot of things. I think a lot of us in our minds have an idea of what we will and what we won't tolerate. But then you bring in emotions and family and children and relationships and, terribly of all, ministry. And when you're confronted with the past in the present, it's terrible. And for me, that's where I am, where all these things are the past, and all of these wonderful things that happen outside of the past, but the present, because of the enemy and the ability to accuse, are always brought into the present. Have we moved past these things? Clearly no. Excuse me. And so in dealing with marriage and misery, women are more likely to admit when they are miserable in a relationship, and men are more likely to express it in their actions and their coldness toward the person that they are in a relationship with. And those two things coupled together are a dangerous combination. I am very verbal, and I can also be very cold. And when you have dealt with yourself, especially, I know so many of us have, coming into Torah, knowing how we justified our sin and our indiscretions, and we made them okay. And before it was just, oh, I can just ask Jesus to forgive me and it's all good. Where now we've entered into a realm where where we now have to be accountable and have to um we have to account for the things that we've done. We were told in Christianity to focus so hard on heaven and eternity and what happens after this life. But we were not really trained and not really told how to deal with the things that happen in this life. And where it comes to marital breakdowns, and where it comes to miscommunications, and where it comes to two imperfect people becoming one. We are so far removed and so far outside of our culture that most of our relationships didn't get a fair chance on just because we didn't remain chaste until we were married to the person we were married to. Just that little thing about our culture could solve so many issues, because you would have just been with one person. So then all of your issues and all the things you go through with this one person. But you take into account, let's say in my personal dynamic, my husband was married twice before him and I got married. And I dated people, even though I was young. You know, I grew up in a culture and at a time where different levels of sexual exploration were permissible, even if you were not having intercourse. And so there is still taint there. And you bring that into a relationship, and then you have men, rightfully so, not wrong, who hold women to a particular standard, and they want perfect women while they are also imperfect. And then you have women who are taught it doesn't matter what I do, I should be held to this particular standard. And I think both people should. I think when you come into a relationship, just like when you come into covenant in Torah, when you come into covenant in Torah, you become a new creature. I think in a relationship, the same thing should happen. But we're not taught, and most of us didn't come into covenant in Torah. We came into covenant under outside of Torah. You're not taught that there is a clean slate. And then on top of that, because there's not a clean slate, and then because you don't treat people like they're on a clean slate, then you bring in adverse issues. And that leads me into the curses. The curses in Deuteronomy 28, the Most High showed me that they're not only an identification, but they're also a prescription. They're a prescription for identifying issues and knowing how to pull them out with Torah. All of the curses are issues that have occurred and caused the covenant between husband and wife, Yah, and the called out congregation to be broken. And the only way to remedy those things is to return to Torah. And once those things are remedied and restored, what the Most High has the ability of doing is that he has the ability of wiping the slate clean and starting over. The reason why divorce is permissible is because when covenant is broken, it's very difficult for people to wipe the slate clean. I had a conversation with a couple once, and it was a situation of female infidelity and a man being faithful. And in the situation, the woman was being punished, literally, for her infidelity. And the man's heart was clearly hard because you took the person back, but you didn't forgive the person. So in reality, now you're both in a violation, because now you are holding something against a person and punishing them for something that they came forward and they told you about. And they have moved past and have tried to move past, but now the abuse and the reminder of how this has made this person feel on a day-to-day basis then causes the person to have no faith in the idea of reconciliation, which is a ministry as Hebrews that we're called to. And there can be reconciliation without the continuance of relationship, just to put that out there. And what I saw was this idea that we want to keep relationships, but we don't want to let go of how those people in the relationships have impacted us. And we are told to forgive and not forget. But when you are in covenant and you renew covenant, you decide to continue walking in covenant, then those negative parts of the relationship then have to be taken out of the covenant, and the covenant has to be rewritten with newness. And I know for me personally, and probably for other people as well, the reason why they have an issue in their relationship once they've even crossed over into Torah, and even if they've issues have happened in Torah and they've resolved them and decided to move forward, is because our human ability to hold on to things has not yet been aligned with Torah. And what we do is we punish people for how they made us feel and what they've done to us. And I now get this idea of divorce outside of, hating it, and outside of all these things, is because it shows an extreme character flaw in us, and it shows an extreme lack of spiritual and heart transformation in us, because all the debt that we have on our account for how we've transgressed the Father, and yet a person who selfishly didn't really do the stuff to you, they did it for themselves. There's a difference. They just love themselves more than you. That is what infidelity is. That is what all offenses are in relationship, is when a person loves themselves more than they love you. And what hurts very bad is that we feel like these people love us more than they love themselves, but really our only ability is to love a person as much as we love ourselves. And so what happens is we find out how little we love ourselves when we do things and we break Torah. But the issue is, the Father sees that the heart is hard, and that we have not yet reached a place where our heart and his heart are in sync. And so we really, I saw something and it like put a thought in my head, but I'm going to move on. I'll get back to it. We really have to evaluate how much we actually love the people we love. And are we hurt because we just love ourselves so much? And now the thought came up, we love ourselves so much. And as a narcissist, we hate that a person doesn't love us as much as we love ourselves. That is the case of humanity. We love ourselves so much, and we just can't fathom how a person can't love us as much as we love ourselves. And we are so much of narcissists that we won't look at ourselves and say, what about me? Maybe a person just can't love. And then maybe I should fix that. But what happens, and I'm speaking to my personal, because we all have a personal amount of narcissism, what we hate is then for us to be the person who loses. Because when a person no longer loves me and I'm a narcissist, then it makes it hard for me to love myself. And so long ago, I did personal introspection. And I looked at all the ways that I personally loved myself more than I loved the Father. No matter how a person treated me, no matter how a person made me feel, no matter how valid I felt like my actions were, my actions prove that I loved me more than I loved the Word and more than I loved the Father. And I explained that to my spouse in that very way. Like, I know this is going to be difficult for you because you're going to have a lot of issues with the things I'm going to tell you. But at the end of the day, I've realized that they don't pertain, they're not how you feel about what I've done doesn't affect me, because I know that ultimately I didn't do them against you, I did them against me. I have more forgiving to do for myself. I have more forgiveness to gain from the Father. And I can't really convince you, nor will I convince you to love me as much as I'm choosing to love myself right now. And that was very difficult for me, because when you're dealing with your own personal amount of narcissism, what you want is for a person to forgive you like you've forgiven yourself, and to love you like you love yourself, and to love you like the Father loves you. When you realize that after I open up this Pandora's box, I'm okay with you not loving me like I love myself now. But what I'm not okay with is you not respecting me for telling you and being open with you. Now, I know what often comes up, and in a lot of cases it does. And person can correct me if I'm right or wrong on this, because I could be wrong. But most of us, when we've made a decision to do or to not do something, or to stay in a relationship or not stay in a relationship, we've already done it when a person has presented the information to us. Whether we're hurt, whether we go through it, whether we leave, whether whatever, we've decided where we're going to be in the relationship. And so I don't know what amount of information is going to skew or weigh that. And I'm making a personal decision that obviously none of that information is off limits when you're sharing with a person. So I know that probably will come up like with people, like, how do I regain this love for myself and change how I feel in this situation? That is up to you and up to the person that you're talking to. If they want all the information, give them all the information. If they don't want it, that's on you. But reserve the right. But at some point, there has to be a lock and a vault on the past. When you sit down and you decide where you're going to move in your relationship, if you move forward, then you have to put a clamp on the past. And I know that is so difficult, not only for me, but for other people. Don't turn into the enemy and the accuser by saying you want to move forward, but then knowing you really don't, but knowing you just don't know how to move forward. Because what it does is then it causes later issues where you're going to work through emotional things because a part of the relationship has been damaged. But now that the line of communication has been open, there should be an ability to communicate respectfully, and to respect the person, and to honor how you should be treating the person at this stage in your relationship. I thought I'd put that out there. Okay, but to these curses, because I don't want to keep you too long. I've already kept you long enough. But Deuteronomy 28, and I know we look at this a lot, but we're going to look at it as a prescription for the things that are happening, because we're acting like when we get into a relationship that people are perfect, but we're literally dealing with a cursed people. And until we've mastered the curses in our life by walking in Torah and letting them go, and letting our old man die, and not letting anyone else call them into remembrance. I bought a sweatshirt the other day, and when I get it, I'm going to wear it. But it literally says, who the Son sets free is free indeed. And it struck me so to the core, because so often we live in another person's perpetual hell when we have released ourselves from our own perpetual hell. And I'm at the point in my life, and I'm sure a lot of people are, especially if they're walking Torah, where I'd be damned if I live in the perpetual hell you want to create for me based upon some stuff that I've been released from. You can't do that because that's where misery in marriage comes from. You are creating for me a perpetual hell so you can make me feel like I've made you feel. And I'm not talking about somebody who's just lived it, but someone who has also done it. You cannot do that. But you also can't be exhibiting the same behaviors that cause the person to do those things, because now you're creating a trigger that makes the person who is imperfect do those things. We need to get out of this mindset that the people that we are with are perfect and that somehow we can hold them to a higher standard than we hold ourselves to. It doesn't exist. A person has to be held to the standard of Torah. Period. They can't create their personal standard. They can't tell you how great they are as a person, how much they're doing for you as a person. If you're not doing for me Torah, then you're not doing anything for me at all. I just slapped myself in the face just saying that, because it's difficult to do Torah with a person when you don't even want to do life with a person. And it makes it difficult to carry out our function and please the Father when we stay in relationships that are broken, that continually cause us to violate Torah by not doing the functions in marriage that Torah deems necessary. I don't want to sleep with you. I don't want to cook for you. I don't want to clean for you. I don't want to create shalom in this house because I don't want to be with you. And so if you can't do the function of Torah with a person, then being with that person is causing you to then violate Torah, which puts you in the same perpetual sin that you were before you even got in Torah. So there has to become a place in a relationship where two people decide, I'm going to be with you. And by being with you, that means that I'm going to do Torah with you. And not just what I think is necessary for you, but what Torah says is necessary for you. Another slap in my own face. And while we hate divorce, and while divorce is never the answer, if you can't do Torah with a person, then you cannot be with a person. Because you are in violation. You are doing it you're doing it externally, but internally and in your home, you are not creating shalom. You can't raise children in Torah if you don't do Torah between you and your spouse. You cannot raise children in Torah just if you homeschool and you and your spouse hate each other. You cannot raise children in Torah if you doing you and this person's doing them. You cannot raise children in Torah if you're with a man who does not emotionally support you. You cannot raise children in Torah if you're with a woman who doesn't emotionally support you. You cannot raise children in Torah if you're with a person who disrespects you. You cannot raise children in Torah if you're cold and callous toward one another. Because what you're doing is you're teaching them false culture and false religion. And what they will do is they will perpetuate that falseness, and you have failed to do your job as a Torah-keeping person, because they are not going to be raised in Torah. They will be raised in a fake world, and they will be raised in a world where nothing is truly Torah and everything is split. They will never see Chad. They will never see balance. They will never see a breaking of curses, and what they will grow and do is to perpetuate those curses. As a woman, if you're in a relationship where a person is cold and callous, and they do not respect you, and they do not help you, and they do not emotionally support you, you are setting up your daughters to be in relationships where they will be with men who are cold and callous, who do not respect them, or they will dominate over their men if you are a woman who dominates over their husband. And there's no way that you have done anybody a service. There's absolutely no way. Now, we'd have to get into other things. So if the issue of divorce comes up, people need to seek their spiritual leaders and their spiritual counselors. They need to seek Yah. Because it's one thing to not want to do something. It's a whole nother thing to not want to do something. So there's a difference. For instance, if you're just lazy as hell and you don't want to do the functions of Torah, and you have a problem with a man who works every day and brings food home every day and who's a great spouse, but you're just like, I don't like gender roles, then yeah, you have an issue, and you don't fit into the category of divorce. You need to work on your heart. Everybody who even feels like they want a divorce needs to work on their heart, but specifically there. But this is an issue of, is there going to be more damage done by the relationship um, being fake? Or are two people going to get to the point where they can actually walk in Torah and walk with each other and agree with each other toward a greater goal? Okay, let's get to this Deuteronomy 28. So 28 verse 1, it says, "And it shall come to pass, if thou shalt hearken diligently unto the voice of Yahuwah thy Elohim, to observe and to do all his commandments which I command thee this day, that Yahuwah thy Elohim will set thee on high above all nations of the earth." So if we're still feeling cursed, it's because we're not diligently observing all the commandments. It says, "And all these blessings shall come upon thee and overtake thee, if thou shalt hearken unto the voice of Yahuwah thy Elohim, because blessed shalt thou be in the city, and blessed shalt thou be in the field. Blessed shall the fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy ground, and the fruit of thy cattle, the increase of thy kind, and the flocks of thy sheep. Blessed shall be thy basket and thy store. Blessed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and blessed shalt thou be when thou goest out. Yahuwah shall cause thy enemies that rise up against thee to be smitten before thy face. They shall come out against thee one way, and flee before thee 7 ways. Yahuwah shall command the blessing upon thee in thy storehouses, and all that thou settest thine hand unto, and he shall bless thee in the land which Yahuwah thy Elohim giveth thee. Yahuwah shall establish thee a holy people unto himself, as he has sworn unto thee, if thou shalt keep the commandments of Yahuwah thy Elohim, and walk in his ways. And all the people of the earth shall see that thou art called by the name of Yahuwah, and they shall be afraid of thee. And Yahuwah shall make thee plenteous in goods, in the fruit of thy body, and the fruit of thy cattle, and the fruit of thy ground, and the land which Yahuwah sware unto thy fathers to give thee. And Yahuwah shall open unto thee his good treasure, the heaven, to give the rain, and unto thy land in its season. And to be blessed all the work of thy hand, and thou shalt lend unto many nations, and thou shalt not borrow. And Yahuwah shall make thee the head and not the tail, and thou shalt be above only, and thou shalt not be beneath, if thou hearken unto the commandments of Yahuwah thy Elohim, which I command thee this day to observe and to do them. And thou shalt not go aside from any of the words which I command thee this day, to the right or to the left, to go after other gods to serve them. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken." So we're getting into the second part. So you see all the blessings that come with obedience. All those functions come from a covenant relationship. You do your part, I'm doing my part. Now we're going to see the breakdown in this. And then after that, we're going to see how to come back after that breakdown has happened. That is the hard part, because we see perfection. If this is a marriage, which it is, you're seeing Yahuwah speak to the nation. And he's saying, look, this is the perfect relationship. I got you. You're mine. I got you, and you were still jacked up. I took a jacked up nation and a jacked up people, right? And I'm making these promises to you in your jacked up state. All I'm asking you is to walk according to my command and to be obedient. So for us, as imperfect people who are with imperfect people, we have even more of a duty to carry out this function to an imperfect person, because only a person in a relationship who is blameless can bring accusation against the other party. I'm going to say it again for emphasis. Only a person in a relationship who is blameless can bring accusation and execution of judgment against a person in that relationship. A person asked once why there could even be whores in Zion. And part of it comes with the lack of execution of judgment. But the other part comes that the person who had to bring the accusation against a person to have the judgment executed on them when it came to a husband and wife was the husband. And what you see is when Yah goes back into covenant with Israel, he's the person who both executes judgment and can bring the accusation. And so in this sense, this covenant with his people, he's given it in his law. And then there's going to become the breakdown in the covenant and what that looks like. But then the end and the beauty of it is the restoration of the covenant through his ability to withhold judgment and to not call to remembrance those things from the past, so that the covenant can stay in function, so that two people or two parties can then walk out and show the beauty of a covenant relationship, even in its flaws. And that just spoke to me just now. I don't know how anybody else felt about that, but the ability for two imperfect people to accept, acknowledge, move past, and recovenant instead of going toward divorce truly shows the Abba's love. And it really is the true picture of the Hamashiach and the called out assembly. Everybody sees the breakdown in the relationship. Everybody understands divorce, but very few people are privy to being and covering and seeing and walking through the misery that moves toward a restored covenant that shows the restoration of his people. I believe that we're living in a time where if we would just let go of our personal narcissism and how much a person's supposed to love us and how much our love for the Father is, that we can then move into a place where we can actually walk and treat one another in a way that shows a true reflection and the true restoration of the house of Israel. I really, really believe that. But it has to come at the expense of self. It has to come at the expense of personal hurt. It has to come at the expense of vengeance and recompensing that which a person has done to us back on to them. Okay, so then the breakdown. Verse 14, and thou shalt not go aside, and this is where a lot of us are living in, and this is how a lot of us entered into covenant. We did not enter into covenant in commandment. We entered into covenant in curse. And so there has to be a breakdown of the curses so that we can understand how we then can exit out of the curse and then walk in Deuteronomy 28, verse 1 through 13. So many of us, even in Torah, are still walking in Deuteronomy 28, 14 through 68. That's where we're walking. And it says, and thou shalt not go aside, from any of the words that I command thee this day, to the right or to the left, to go after other gods to serve them. Okay, verse 15. But it shall come to pass, if thou wilt not hearken unto the voice of Yahuwah thy Elohim, to observe to do all his commandments and his statutes, which I command thee this day, and that all these curses shall come upon thee and overtake thee. Cursed out thou be in the city. Everybody all around the city talking about your business. And cursed out thou be in the field. Cursed shall your basket be and your store. Cursed shall the fruit of your body be, and the fruit of your land, and the increase of your kind, and the flocks of your sheep. Cursed shalt thou be when thou comest in, and cursed shalt thou be when thou goest out. Mind you, I did a video on this, and it says, why are black people cursed? Curse means literally the idea of a father spitting in his child's face. It is terrible. And so many of us are living in a place where we feel like that, feel so disrespected. We feel so low. Our wallets are disrespectful. Our relationships are disrespectful. Our kids are disrespectful. Our bank account is disrespectful. That's really what it is, the idea of, like, it's just disrespectful. Just looking at it is disgusting. Okay, Yahuwah shall send upon thee cursing, vexation, rebuke, and all that thou settest thy hand unto for to do, until thou be destroyed, and until thou perish quickly, because of the wickedness of thy doings, whereby thou hast forsaken me. Not one another, but him. Yahuwah shall make the pestilence cleave unto thee, until he hath consumed thee from off the land whither thou goest to possess it. Yahuwah shall smite thee with the consumption, and with the fever, and with the inflammation, and with an extreme burning, and with the sword, and with blasting, and with mildew, and they shall pursue thee until thou perish. We have a hard enough time dealing with the curses that Yahuwah has put upon us than for us to try to be the accuser and bring accusation against each other. Because all you're doing is throwing the curses in people's faces. And the heaven that is over thy head shall be brass, and the earth that is under thee shall be iron. And Yahuwah shall make the rain of thy land powder and dust. From heaven shall it come down upon thee until thou be destroyed. And Yahuwah shall cause thee to be smitten before thine enemies, and thou shalt go out one way against them and flee 7 ways before them. And thou shalt be removed into all the kingdoms of the earth. And thy carcass shall be meat unto all the fowls of the air, and unto the beasts of the earth. And no man shall fray them away. And Yahuwah shall smite thee with the botch of Egypt, and with the hemorrhoids, and with the scab, and with the itch, whereof thou cannot be healed. Yahuwah shall smite thee with madness and blindness and astonishment of heart. We often read these curses and we look at it from a slavery standpoint, but we still have not identified how these curses are still upon us. No, we're not walking around necessarily in chains and in bondage. When you look at this idea of madness, we're not right here. We're not relationally here. And blindness, we can't see how we affect one another and what we do to one another. And astonishment of heart. And thou shalt grope at noonday, as the blind grope in the darkness, and thou shalt not prosper in thy ways, and thou shalt only be oppressed and spoiled evermore, and no man shall save thee. Thou shalt betroth a wife. And now these are the psychological curses and the perpetuation of these curses that are breaking down our families, even in Torah. Whether it happened before Torah or after, these things are now psychologically breaking us down, and we're still living in these curses. Thou shalt betroth a wife, and another man shall lay with her. It's not just talking about a slave master. This is still happening. You claim something to yourself. You have someone that's your own, and another man lays with her. A person cheats with her. These are still things that are happening. These are still perpetual sins that are taking place that have not been broken, and the damages of them are still in our relationships, which means that we're still living and experiencing the pain of the curses, even in our modern day condition as awakened Hebrew Israelites. Thou shalt build a house, and thou shalt not dwell therein. And obviously, it's dealing with the same thing. Build a house, and obviously in the slave times, you had to leave your house, or you build a house and another person live in it. But even now, you build a home, and you don't even feel comfortable in your own home. Still living in a curse. There's no shalom in your home. You can't dwell there. You can't rest. You can't, the word is teshevet. It's the same word for village, but it's shem bet tav. It means to rest for Shabbat. It means to rest, dwell, sit, to enjoy, to feel firm in that place. You can't even do it. Thou shalt not dwell therein. Thou shalt plant a vineyard, and shalt not gather the grapes thereof. Thine ox shall be slain before thine eyes, and thou shalt not eat thereof. Thy ass shall be violently taken away from thee before thy face, and not be restored unto thee. Thy sheep shall be given unto thine enemies, and thou shalt have none to rescue them. Thy sons and daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thy hand. Okay, we see that in slavery, but we also see it in the breakdown of our homes, where you have men who want to be in their children's lives, and you got either other men raising them, or they're in the hands of their spouse, and they are stuck in a situation where they can't see their kids, and they long for them, and they want to be around their kids, but you have baby mamas who won't let them see their kids. You have CPS, like a sister just mentioned. We're still living in these curses because of a breakdown in our family unit. The fruit of thy land and all thy labor shall a nation which thou knowest not eat up. You live in this land. You know all the stuff that eats up your money. And thou shalt only be oppressed and crushed always. So that thou shalt be mad for the sight of thine eyes, which thou shalt see, and it'll make you crazy. All those things, you'll see them, you'll experience them, and they make you crazy. They make it terrible. They make life suck. It makes it horrible. Yahuwah shall smite thee in thy knees and in thy legs with a sore botch that cannot be healed, from the sole of thy foot to the top of thy head. Yahuwah shall bring thee and thy king, which thou shalt set over thee, unto a nation which neither thou nor thy fathers have known. And there you shall serve other gods, wood and stone. And thou shalt become an astonishment and a proverb and a byword amongst all the nations, where the Yahuwah shall lead thee. Thou shalt carry much seed out into the field, and shall gather but a little in, for the locust shall consume it. Thou shalt plant vineyards and dress them, but thou shalt drink of the wine. Thou shalt not drink of the wine, nor gather the grapes, for the worm shall eat them. Thou shalt have olive trees throughout all thy coast, but thou shalt not anoint thyself with the oil, for thou oil shall cast its fruit. Thou shalt beget sons and daughters, but thou shalt not enjoy them, for they shall go into captivity. All the trees and the fruit of thy land shall the locust consume. The stranger that is within thee shall get up high above thee, and thou shalt come down very low. He shall lend to thee, and thou shalt not lend to him. He shall be the head, and thou shalt be the tail. Moreover, all these curses shall come upon thee, and shall pursue thee, and overtake thee, till you be destroyed, because you have not hearkened unto the voice of Yahuwah thy Elohim, to keep his commandments and his statutes which he commanded thee. These things are not happening because we did them so per se to other people. They're happening because the things that we did to other people affect Yahuwah. And they shall be upon thee for a sign and for a wonder, and upon thy seed forever. So when we break commandments, it goes on our seed. Because thou servest not Yahuwah thy Elohim with joyfulness and with gladness of heart for the abundance of all things. When we are in relationships and we are withholding the commandments, we are not serving Yahuwah with joyfulness, and we are reaping back onto ourselves these curses. Therefore shalt thou serve thine enemies. If you don't want to serve Yah, if you don't want to do it to your brethren and to the people within your home, you're going to serve your enemies. Then therefore you should serve their enemies, which Yahuwah shall send thee, and then you won't have a choice. And you do it in hunger and in thirst and in nakedness and in want of all things. And he shall put a yoke of iron upon thy neck until he has destroyed you. Yahuwah shall bring a nation against you from afar, from the end of the earth, as swift as an eagle flieth. A nation whose tongue thou shalt not understand. A nation of a fierce countenance, which shall not regard the person thereof. Nor shall show favor to the young, and he shall eat the fruit of thy cattle, and the fruit of thy land until thou be destroyed, which also shall not leave thee either corn, wine, or oil, or the increase of kine, or the flocks of thy sheep, until he has destroyed thee. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates until thy high and fenced walls come down, wherein thou trustest, throughout all thy land. And he shall besiege thee in all thy gates throughout all thy land, which Yahuwah thy Elohim has given you. And thou shalt eat the fruit of thine own flesh, of thy own body, and the flesh of thy sons and thy daughters, which Yahuwah thy Elohim has given thee in the siege, and in the straitness wherewith thy enemies shall distress thee. So that the man that is tender among you, and this is where we get into specifically relationships, so that the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil toward his brother and toward the wife of his bosom. This idea means dysfunctional. The man who is tender among you, meaning his heart is tender and he has ability and a capacity to love. Because of the way we heap curses onto the Most High and the way we treat one another, the eye of a man that is tender, we don't even know what a man who has a tender eye and is delicate. A delicate man doesn't even exist anymore. It is a curse to have to be tough. It is a curse to have to be callous. It's a curse to have to be the way that we are. And now we see it. And we see why we're affected by it. And we see how our actions and how we break Torah continues this curse and allows our men to not be able to be delicate and to be tender. It says, so the man that is tender among you and very delicate, his eye shall be evil toward his brother. And we know how we are as a people toward our brothers and sisters. And then toward the wife of his bosom, and toward the remnant of his children, which he shall leave. Leaving our children is a curse. But because of the curses and because of how women treat men and because of how men treat women and because of the dysfunctional relationship, you have a man who is evil, which means dysfunctional toward his brother. So there's no brotherly love. There's no accountability. There's no camaraderie. A brother can't check a brother and be like, hey man, you should blah, blah, blah. And can't even do that because of the dysfunction in brotherhood. And then a man can even be tender and delicate toward his wife because of her own heaping of these curses and pursuing after other gods and other men and other stimuli. So then now he's evil and dysfunctional toward her. And then toward the remnant of his children, which he shall leave. You know what? I don't have family. I don't have a brother. Can't nobody tell me nothing. My wife is tripping out. And because she's tripping out here, I'm going to leave her and these kids. These are realities because of the curses. so that he will not give to any of them of the flesh of his children whom he shall eat, because he hath nothing left him in the siege. He can't even be around his family because of the curses, everything has been taken away from him. His ability to love, his ability to be tender and delicate. He didn't even have his wife because she ain't shit. Like, I'm sorry, but it's literally like all right here. It's all right here. And it makes it difficult to function in relationship. So it says, so that he will not give any of them of the flesh of his children whom shall eat, because he hath nothing left in the siege, and in the straitness wherewith thy enemies shall distress thee in thy gates. And so with all of that, with all of, he doesn't have a wife, he can't trust his wife, she's nothing to him, his brothers are nothing to him, he's left his children, and now his enemies are now distressing him within the gates. That is the condition of the so-called black man. His wife doesn't understand why he's so callous and why he's so turned off and why he's not there. And this is because of curses. And in turn, because of those curses, then she goes out and she pursues, in a Torah sense, the women going out and they pursue other gods and they pursue other stimuli because they need to feel alive. And in doing so, it corrupts the children because he don't even know if the children are probably even his. And he can't even provide for them because of the curses and what's been done to the land. His land doesn't reap fruit because of curses he doesn't even know have been heaped. And then on top of that, his enemies are distressing him. The tender and delicate woman among you, which would not adventure to set the sole of her foot upon the ground for delicateness and tenderness, her eye shall be dysfunctional toward the husband of her bosom, and toward her son, and toward her daughter. Same exact curses. So where she would guard herself and care for herself and hold herself in high esteem, she doesn't either. And toward her young one that cometh out from beneath her feet, and toward her children, which she shall bear, for she shall consume them or eat them for one of all things secretly in the siege and straitness. So she'll kill her babies. She'll leave her children. She'll get abortions because she wants all the things. Okay, the city's being destroyed, but okay, if I just go and be with this person, I can have this. I don't have to struggle. If I go and sell my body, then I don't have to do this and I can have money. If I leave my husband and go and be with the enemy, then I can at least fit into the culture and I can at least buy nice things and live nice, and I don't have to look like I'm under curses and I'm under the curse of the captivity. And it still says for her too, wherewith her thine enemies shall distress thee in thy gates too. So in all of that, and you think you're getting all of this and you're avoiding the curses, you're still living under the curse and your enemy still hates you. If thou will not observe to do, verse 58, all the words of this law that are written in this book, that thou mayest fear this glorious and fearful name, Yahuwah thy Elohim, then Yahuwah will make the plagues wonderful, and the plagues of thy seed, even great plagues, and of long continuance, and sore sickness, and of long continuance. I said it twice, and Yahuwah said it twice. Moreover, he will bring upon thee all the diseases of Egypt, which thou wast afraid of, and they shall cleave unto thee also every sickness and every plague, which is not written in the book of this law. Then will Yahuwah bring so stuff you ain't even thought of before. This megavirus syphilis and megavirus herpes and megavirus gonorrhea, all this, he will bring upon you until you be destroyed. And you shall be left few in number, whereas you were as the stars of heaven for multitude, because thou wouldest not obey the voice of Yahuwah thy Elohim. And it shall come to pass that as Yahuwah rejoice over you to do you good and to multiply you, so Yahuwah will rejoice over you to destroy you and to bring you to naught. And ye shall be plucked from off the land whither thou goest to possess it. And Yahuwah shall scatter thee among all the people, from the one end of the earth unto the other. And there shalt thou serve other Elohim, which neither thou nor their fathers have known, even wood and stone. And among these nations shalt thou find no ease, neither shall the sole of thy foot have no rest. But Yahuwah shall give thee their tremble of heart, failing of eyes, and sorrow of mind. And thy life shall hang in doubt before thee, and thou shalt fear day and night, and shall have none assurance of thy life. In the morning thou shalt say, would God it were evening. And for the fear of thine heart wherewith thou shalt fear, and for the sight of thy eyes which thou shalt see. Being miserable in marriage makes you feel like that too. Being in that place where every day it's just like, I just wish this could be over. Just wish it could be over. Not even a suicidal sense, not saying that that doesn't cross the mind as well, but just like, I'm just in a perpetual hell. Not realizing that the perpetual hell is something that you create in your disobedience. And that it also is something that you have the ability to break in your obedience. Not just your obedience to the Most High, but that person, and this is, don't forget this. The Most High works like this. You can't just restore to Yahuwah and make right with Yahuwah and not make right with your fellow man. It doesn't work like that. So you can't just make right and say, okay, I'm good now, and not also restore the person that you have broken. And it's not the restoration of apology. It's the shalom does not come without restitution, which is the Hebrew word shalem. There has to be restitution paid, and the restitution cannot be paid in distress. If I gave you an ox, if I took your ox, I have to restore that ox. I can't give you a goat. You need your ox back. So in a sense of emotional distress, if I have, let me rewind that. And if I give you the ox and I restored it, you can't ask me for more than what I've broken just because of how it emotionally damaged you when I took it. The same thing in a relationship. If I've somehow done something in the relationship to break it, it is my responsibility to restore it. But you can't keep adding interest because that's not Torah. You can't add interest on that which I restore. We don't charge each other interest. That's not our business. That's not what we do. If I've done something, my job is to make it right. And then as I'm making it right, you can't be adding offense on as I'm making it right. And in the same way, I can't keep doing things and I can't keep doing the same things to you that have put you in that place. So if it's infidelity, you cannot be trying to make a relationship right and still have a side chick or a side guy. If you're trying to make a relationship right and and the issue is disrespect, in making this relationship right, you can't be disrespectful. But at the same time, you cannot grieve the person who is trying to make it right and keep bringing up to remembrance the old things that they have done in destroying the relationship while they're making it right, because then you cause a person to now have to retract. There has to be forward movement on both sides of the equation. Okay, verse 68, and it says, and Yahuwah shall bring thee into Egypt, into bondage again with ships, by the way whereof I spake unto thee, and thou shalt see it no more again, and there you shall be sold unto thy enemies for bondmen and bondwomen, and no man shall buy you. And I want to go to one other place, and I want to deal with what comes after this. And what comes if, because Yahuwah took into account the if of our breaking his commandments. And he talks about when, not if, I'm sorry, not the if, but the when. And he talks about when this happens, what we should do. Go to Deuteronomy chapter 30, we'll start at verse 1. And it says, and it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, not if, when. Remember, none of this stuff had happened when Moshe was prophesying what Yahuwah told him to say. He said, and it shall come to pass when all these things are come upon thee, because you're going to do it, the blessing and the curse, which I have set before thee, and thou shalt call them to mind among all the nations, whether Yahuwah thy Elohim has driven you, where we are right now, and thou shalt return unto Yahuwah thy Elohim, and shalt obey his voice according to all that I command thee this day, thou and your children, with all your heart, with all the authority within you, and with all your soul, with all of your breath, with all of your being. That then Yahuwah thy Elohim will turn thy captivity, and have compassion upon thee, and will return and gather thee from all the nations whither Yahuwah thy Elohim has scattered you. If any of thine be driven out into the uttermost parts of the heavens, from thence will Yahuwah thy Elohim gather thee, and from thence will he fetch thee. And Yahuwah thy Elohim will bring thee into the land which thy fathers possess, and thou shalt possess it, and he will do thee good, and multiply thee above thy fathers. And Yahuwah will circumcise your heart. It's a heart issue. And the heart of your seed, to love Yahuwah thy Elohim with all your heart, with all your soul, that thou mayest live. And Yahuwah the Elohim will put all these curses upon thine enemies, and on them that hate thee, which persecuteth thee. And thou shalt return and obey the voice of Yahuwah thy Elohim, and do all his commandments, which I have commanded thee this day. And Yahuwah the Elohim will make thee plenteous in every work of thy hand, in the fruit of thy body, and in the fruit of thy cattle, and in the fruit of thy land, for good. For Yahuwah will again rejoice over thee for good, as he rejoiced over thy fathers. If thou shalt hearken unto the voice of Yahuwah thy Elohim to keep his commandments and his statutes, which are written in this book of the law, and if thou turn unto Yahuwah thy Elohim with all thy heart and with all thy soul, for this commandment which I command thee this day, it is not hidden from thee, neither is it afar off. It is not in heaven, that thou shouldest say, who shall go up for us to heaven, and bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it. And this is so on what I was saying earlier. It's not something that we're waiting for later. The way we do the commandments is we do it to each other. We're not going back into the land until we can do it to each other, until we can do the restoration and restore within each other. You want to do it to the Most High and then reject to do it to your brother. He's like, save your offering, save your prayer, save everything you got, because you have aught with your brother. You have aught in your home with your spouse. You have aught amongst your children. Don't even come to me trying to fix what you got going on between me and you, and not fix what you have going on in your home. It's backwards to try to live and walk out Torah only to the Most High and not have that translate between each other. He said, neither is it beyond the sea that thou shouldest say, who shall go over the sea for us and bring it to us. Torah is not only in the land. It's not only back home. It's to be done here too, that we may hear it and do it. But the word is very nigh unto thee, in thy mouth, in thy heart, that thou mayest do it. What we say, the law on our tongue, amongst our brethren, and our heart toward them, is something that we can do. It's something that we can do. People say, how can we turn this captivity? With our mouth and with our heart. And me personally, I'm going to repent publicly, because my mouth is terrible. Like terrible. When I feel attacked and offended, my mouth turns into sharp swords, and I will go home and ask my spouse for forgiveness for what my mouth does, because I allow my emotions to be tweaked, and then my mouth and my heart, because out of the heart, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. So my heart and my mouth are out of line. My heart and my mouth are not in Torah. Doesn't matter what I do in the physical, where that thing that sits deep, the authority within me, is skewed against my spouse. And it doesn't matter what that person says or how they hurt me. My authority within is still not in line with the Father, because even if a person says something against me, I should know better than to know that it's not that person doing it, but the enemy working through them, and know how to say, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. And I still have to carry out my duty and my function in Torah, because I still have to do my part in breaking the curses, so that we all can benefit from the release of the captivity that we're in. And the adversary has an interesting way of making us heap curses upon ourselves, even when we don't think we're doing it, because he wants to keep us in bondage. Just how I set that out there. But the word is very nigh unto thee, verse 14, in thy mouth and in thy heart, that thou mayest do it. See, I've set before you this day life and good, and death and evil, life and function, chaim, function, mavet, ra, life and good, death and evil. And that I command thee this day to love Yahuwah thy Elohim, to walk in his ways, and to keep his commandments, and his statutes, and his judgments, that thou mayest live and multiply. And Yahuwah thy Elohim shall bless thee in the land whither thou goest to possess it. But if thine heart turn away, so that thou wilt not hear, but thou shalt be drawn away and worship other gods and serve them, I denounce unto you this day that ye shall surely perish, that ye shall not prolong your days upon the land whither thou passest over Jordan to go to possess it. I call heaven and earth to record this day against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both thou and thy seed may live. That thou mayest love Yahuwah thy Elohim, and that thou mayest obey his voice, and that thou mayest cleave unto him, for he is thy life, and the length of thy days, that thou mayest dwell in the land which Yahuwah sware unto thy fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give them. Shalom. Torah is life, and how we live in secret, and how we live in our homes, and what sins we heap upon ourselves affect us all. So I am being the first person to say, I apologize for the things that I do that you don't see that affect us all. And I am making a commitment to do different. I don't know what that will look like, relationally, what that will look like in the grander scheme of ministry. I don't know what that will look like, but I know for me and for where I am, I can't heap curses into Israel by what I do. And I can't live in a way knowing that everything that I do does not just affect me, but it affects my children. It affects you all. It affects your children. And the way that we treat one another in home, out of home, the way that we treat each other in sisterhood and brotherhood has to change, because that is the change that the Father is looking for. There is no way as a parent, if we knew our children were fighting, would we leave an inheritance to them only for them to tear it apart. There's no way that the Father is going to return to us our inheritance only for us to tear it apart. And as much as we are all in relationship, and that's very important for relationships and spouses, we have to begin to see ourselves as brothers and sisters. I'm talking about even with your spouse, in the least ancestral way possible, to see that person as a person that is also walking, as Shaul said, in the inheritance with you. You are joint heirs in HaMashiach. Meaning that what you do affects the inheritance, and what your spouse does affects the inheritance. What you do separately affects the inheritance, and what we do as a nation affects the inheritance. We are not single, we are Echad. We are one unit, moving as one. The one monkey stops the show. And I just don't want to be the monkey stopping the show. And it's not hard. It's going to be easy. I'm not going to make it something difficult. I'm not going to say, and it's going to be hard and working through. No. Because with all my heart, I love Yah. And just reading that and seeing that I'm affecting everybody bothers me. That wasn't even a part of what I was even going to talk about. But seeing that it affects me, what I do affects everyone, means that it can't be hard. If I'm doing something that's going to affect my children, and I'm doing something that's going to affect my life, and I'm doing something that's going to affect the inheritance of the children of Israel, there has to be a stop. Just like we stopped eating pork, just like we stopped celebrating pagan holidays, we have to stop. We have to immediately check ourselves and stop. Not tomorrow, not next week, not an Abib resolution, but today we stop. And if we get put in a position where in our own homes, it's causing us to not be able to function, and it's one-sided, and there is oppression, and it's going to tear the children of Israel apart, then we have to evaluate that and we have to do something about it. We have to be accountable to one another for what we're doing. We have to stop today. I can't speak to the brothers with a charge, but I'm calling definitely to the daughters of Zion to stop today. Whatever it is, whatever enmity you have in your heart, whatever hurt, whatever ought you have with your spouse, with your brother, and with your sister, and stop it. Stop it. I don't care whatever camp you're with, whatever group you're with, whatever sect you're with, stop it. Because we are standing with a greater cloud of witnesses, and they are the children. They are the next generation, and they are the people who have not come into this knowledge, waiting to see how this walk is going to affect us. We have to stop it. My mom taught a lesson on Shabbat, and if you haven't checked on her channel, it's Keeping It Royal. And we've been going through Joshua, and we've been going through this idea of fighting for the inheritance. How we have been given an allotment, an inheritance, but we have to fight for it. And I just realized today that we've already been giving the blessings. We've already been given the blessings. And they're before us. Life and function is before us. He said they're not far away, but they're nigh. They're in your heart. They're in your mouth. They're right here in front of us. And just like our ancestors, when we look back and go, why didn't they just fight? Couldn't they see that the Most High had already given them all the things, and he's already restored to them their inheritance, and and it's right here in front of us, in our homes, and with our spouses, and with our brethren, and with those people that we have been chosen to minister to, and we won't go after it. We won't go after it. Because we have not yet begun to walk in Torah. We intellectually understand it, and we can physically do the work of Torah, but we have not begun to walk in Torah. And today the charge to the daughters of Zion is, it's right there. And the blessing of Torah is immediately as you begin to walk in it, he begins to restore back those things. It's not lack, it's not delayed. He's like, it's right there. Like, you just do it. Do it, and I'm telling you, I'm going to do all these things, but you have to do it with all the authority within you. You have to bring everything in subjection under Torah. You have to bring it all under subjection. You have to do it with all the might in you, with all your heart, with all your might, with all your strength, and with all your resources. You have to bring it all in, and you have to begin to do those things and to carry it out. And he is not slack and not laxed. When our ancestors went out to claim their inheritance, they went out and they grabbed it. There's not one tribe that went out to get their inheritance that did not receive what the Most High had given to them. And in the midst of that, even giving them their inheritance, he left their enemies to prove them. So knowing then that it's not going to be with a lack of adversity, but it's going to be easy because it's already done. This is walking in the newness of life. I've met people who have said they've been in Torah and they didn't begin walking in Torah, though, and I understand that. At every stage in our walk, we are walking toward the mark. And there is repentance that is necessary, and there is growth that is necessary. But anything that doesn't grow is dead anyways. So if there can't be growth, then that thing is dead, and it shall be uprooted. So that's the charge. Our inheritance is before us. We look at it every day. It's in our children, for sure. But also the blessings that come with Torah are still available. They're not just available in Shamayim, in heaven. They're not just available in our land, but they're available to us now. Because as we begin to walk in them and do them now, then the Most High is going to begin to restore those things in the present. I want to see the Most High's blessings restored now. I want to be like Job and say, in my flesh, I shall see Yah. I get it. I get it.